All right, strap in, everyone. We're going deep today. We're cracking open the eighth Asian Energy Outlook, aka the AEO8.
Yeah, this is it's a
Whoa.
bit of a beast of a report, but well worth it.
Oh, absolutely. Think of it like this. This report, it's kind of like peeking into the future of energy in Southeast Asia. It's put together by the Asian Center for Energy.
It is, yeah, and they're really trying to figure out how to keep the lights on, how to keep the economies growing.
Right, exactly. But without, turning the whole region into a giant oven.
Yeah. It's that whole, how do you balance growth and sustainability? Big question, right?
Oh, the million-dollar question. And the AEO8, it lays out four possible answers, four different scenarios, four potential paths forward.
Four paths, yeah. You got your baseline scenario, right? That's sort of like if we just stay the course, what happens?
Business as usual kind of thing.
Exactly. Then you've got a scenario based on what countries are already planning to do, the current policy scenario.
Okay, so that takes into account their existing targets and commitments.
Exactly, yeah. Then things start to get really interesting. You've got the regional aspirations scenario.
So that's where they start aiming a bit higher.
A bit higher, yeah.
Yeah.
More ambitious goals, collaborative efforts, shooting for the stars.
I like it. And then the grand finale, the carbon neutrality scenario.
Ah, yes. The holy grail. Reaching net zero emissions, the ultimate goal.
Ambitious, to say the least. Okay, so four possible futures, each with its own set of challenges and opportunities.
Exactly. But one thing is certain, one thing they all agree on, energy demand in ASEAN. It's exploding. The report says it could be like 2.6 times higher by 2050.
Wow, 2.6 times. That's a serious jump. What's driving that kind of growth?
Yeah, think about it, strong economic growth, more people, more industries, more everything, all demanding more energy.
Yeah, more people living more energy-intensive lives, right? More air conditioners, more cars, more factories churning out, well, more stuff.
Right, exactly. It all adds up.
But how do you reconcile that with, not turning the region into a furnace? How do you balance that demand with the need to, well, not cook the planet?
That's the real tightrope walk, isn't it? And that's what the report is wrestling with.
It is a tricky balancing act. So let's start with the current energy landscape. We know fossil fuels are still king in ASEAN. Coal alone accounted for over 30% of the energy mix in 2022.
Yeah, coal is, it's cheap, it's available, and it's deeply entrenched in many economies.
Yeah, it's not going away overnight, that's for sure.
No, it's not. But it's got that big environmental cost. And that's where the AEO8 starts really pushing for alternatives.
Speaking of costs, the report had this pretty shocking statistic about oil imports, 96% dependency rate in 2022. That means almost all the oil ASEAN uses comes from somewhere else.
Yeah, that's a major vulnerability. Think about it. Price shocks, supply disruptions, it's risky.
Risky is an understatement. That's like building your house on someone else's land.
It is. You're at the mercy of, well, everyone else. And it gets worse. The report projects that ASEAN will become a net importer of natural gas by 2027.
Double whammy. So not only are we relying on others for oil, but soon we'll be in the same boat for natural gas.
Exactly, which is why the AEO8 is shouting from the rooftops about diversification. It's about resilience, about not putting all your eggs in one basket.
Makes sense. Less reliance on fossil fuels. Okay, got it. But then where does all this extra energy come from? What's the alternative? What's the plan?
Well, that's where renewables enter the picture. And the AEO8 is practically doing cartwheels over their potential. Solar, wind, hydro, geothermal, bioenergy.
The clean energy all-stars. So how much growth are we talking about here?
Oh, a lot. Like solar and wind, for example. Those are expected to see massive increases in capacity by 2050.
That's pretty impressive, a potential energy revolution, huh?
It is, yeah. A reshaping of how we think about and use energy.
But renewables, they have their downsides too, right? What happens when the sun goes down or the wind stops blowing?
Yeah, that's the tricky part. That's where energy storage comes in. Specifically, the report highlights battery energy storage systems, BES.
BES, okay. So basically, giant batteries that can store up all that renewable energy for later use.
Exactly. They're essential for smoothing out those fluctuations. When the sun's not shining, boom, you've got your battery backup.
Like a giant energy savings account. Smart. So it's not just about generating the energy, it's about figuring out how to store it, how to make it available when we need it.
Exactly. And it's worth noting that the report, it doesn't just stop at solar and wind. They also explore nuclear energy. Now, it's not currently operational in Anishan.
Yeah, nuclear, always a bit of a hot topic.
It is,
Yeah.
but some countries are considering it, especially for those carbon neutrality goals. Indonesia, for example, they're looking into developing nuclear capacity. And the Philippines, they're aiming to get their first nuclear power plant up and running by 2032.
Interesting. A lot to consider there, for sure. What about hydrogen? I keep hearing that hydrogen is going to be the next big thing in clean energy.
It is getting a lot of attention, and the AEO8 acknowledges that potential, especially as a clean energy carrier. They also talk about ammonia, which is derived from hydrogen and can be used as a fuel.
Ammonia, wow. Like the stuff in cleaning products?
The very same. It's easier to store and transport than hydrogen, so for certain applications, it could be a real game changer.
Okay, so we've got renewables, we've got nuclear, we've got hydrogen, we've got ammonia. It's a whole buffet of options.
It is a real energy smorgasbord. But then the question becomes, how do you get all that clean energy from where it's produced to where it's needed?
Ah, the logistics, right. That's always the tricky part.
It is, and this is where the AEO8 brings up this concept of the ASEAN Power Grid, or APG.
The APG. Okay, and what is that exactly?
Imagine like a giant energy superhighway connecting all the ASEAN countries, a network for trading renewable energy.
A regional energy sharing system. That's pretty cool. What are the benefits of something like that?
Well, for one, it could really enhance regional energy security, right? Not so reliant on outside sources.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, it could help optimize energy systems, reduce the need for as much storage, and of course, help lower those decarbonization costs.
Sounds like a win-win all around. Are there any downsides to this power grid idea?
Well, it's not a simple thing to implement. You need a lot of political will, a lot of technical coordination.
For a lot of money, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. Big projects, big price tags. But the AEO8 is betting that the long-term benefits outweigh the costs.
It's an investment in the future.
It is an investment in a cleaner, more sustainable future for the entire region.
Okay, so we've talked about the big picture, the shift away from fossil fuels, the rise of these exciting alternatives. But what about the people? How does all this impact jobs, livelihoods?
That's a great point. And the AEO8, they don't shy away from that. In fact, they project a job boom in the energy sector, especially in renewables.
So it's good for the planet and good for the economy. That's a win-win I can get behind.
Exactly. And it's not just about the numbers either. The AEO8 stresses the social and environmental impacts. Things like community engagement, sustainable land use practices.
Making sure everyone benefits from this transition, not just a select few.
Right, exactly. It's a holistic approach considering all the different angles, the environmental, the economic, the social.
Sounds great in theory, but let's be honest, all this sounds expensive. How much is this going to cost?
The report is pretty upfront about that. It's going to take a significant investment, hundreds of billions of dollars annually, especially for things like power infrastructure.
Whoa, that's a lot of zeros. Where's all that money going to come from?
That is the million-dollar question. The report emphasizes innovative financing, regional cooperation, attracting investment from both public and private sectors.
So a collective effort to fund a collective good.
Precisely. And the stakes are high, not just for ASEAN, but for the entire world. What happens here in terms of energy and sustainability, it has ripple effects everywhere.
It's a global issue for sure. We're all connected.
Absolutely. And the choices made in this region will have a huge impact on all of us.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the big picture energy trends in ASEAN, the shift away from fossil fuels, the rise of all these amazing alternatives like renewables, nuclear, hydrogen, even ammonia.
We've even touched on the potential of the ASEAN Power Grid, that regional energy sharing system.
Right, exactly. And we've talked about the impact on jobs, livelihoods, and the environment. But we've only just scratched the surface of the AEO8. Next up, we're going to dive into the nitty-gritty of those 4 different scenarios, remember? The baseline, the current policies, the regional aspirations, and that ambitious carbon neutrality pathway.
We'll really unpack what each one means in terms of, energy consumption, emissions, costs, job creation, the whole shebang.
We'll break it all down and help you understand how those different futures might play out in your own life. So stick with us. Things are about to get even more interesting.
Buckle up. It's going to be a wild ride.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's dig into those scenarios the AEO8 lays out, starting with the baseline scenario.
The business as usual approach.
Yeah, basically. No big changes. We just kind of keep on keeping on. And spoiler alert, it's a lot of fossil fuels.
Oh, so not exactly sustainable path then.
Not really, no. Remember that 96% oil import dependency we talked about? Yeah, that's still there in this scenario. And coal, still hanging around.
Yikes, not great for the planet or for energy independence. So if we hit the snooze button on change, this is what we're looking at.
Yeah, pretty much. Meets our immediate needs, but doesn't really solve the long-term problems. Just kicks the can down the road.
Got it. So a useful baseline, but hopefully not the path ASEAN actually chooses. What about the scenario based on what countries are already planning to do?
Right, so that's the current policy scenario. It takes into account all the, targets, initiatives, stuff each country is already committed to.
So at least in this one, we see some movement towards cleaner energy.
We do, yeah. More renewables, for
Mhm.
sure, particularly solar and wind. But fossil fuels are still a big part of the mix.
Okay, so it's a step in the right direction, but maybe not a giant leap.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It shows what's possible with current efforts, but also highlights that more needs to be done.
Right, time to up the ambition then. What about that regional aspirations scenario?
Now this is where things get exciting. This scenario takes those regional goals from the ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation, the APAEC, and really ramps them up.
So they're not just dipping their toes in the water anymore, they're going for a swim.
Exactly. Renewables really take center stage in this scenario. They become a major force in the energy mix.
So we're talking a serious shift away from fossil fuels.
Yeah, we see a big increase in solar, wind, and a much greater focus on energy storage solutions.
Okay, now we're talking. This is starting to sound like the kind of future I want to be a part of.
Right, cleaner, more sustainable, more energy independence for the region.
Sounds amazing, but I imagine there are some hurdles to overcome to get there.
Well, the biggest one is cost. All these changes, they require a significant investment in new infrastructure. Solar farms, wind turbines, transmission lines, the whole works.
Yeah, there's always a cost. But I guess the question is, what's the cost of not doing it? Sticking with fossil fuels has its own price tag, right?
Oh, absolutely, both economically and environmentally, for sure. And that brings us to the final scenario, the most ambitious one. Carbon neutrality.
The holy grail. Net zero emissions. Here we come.
That's right. This is the pathway to achieving, well, the ultimate climate goal. And in this scenario, we see a total energy makeover.
So we're talking no more fossil fuels, just sunshine and wind and maybe a sprinkle of nuclear.
Pretty much. Renewables power just about everything.
Got it.
Coal plants disappear, transportation goes electric, energy efficiency is king.
Wow, a true energy revolution. But how realistic is this, really? Can ASEAN actually pull off such a dramatic shift given its current reliance on fossil fuels?
That's the big question. And the AEO8 acknowledges that it would be a massive undertaking. It would require a level of commitment and innovation and investment that we haven't seen before.
So it's possible, but definitely not easy.
Exactly. It would require a complete rethink of how the region produces and consumes energy. It would require strong political will, technological breakthroughs, and a massive influx of investment.
So it's a long shot, but it's a shot worth taking.
I think so, yeah. The AEO8 argues that the long-term benefits of carbon neutrality for both the environment and the economy are huge.
A healthier planet and a more prosperous future, that's a pretty compelling vision.
It is. And it's a vision that I think a lot of people in ASEAN share. They see the urgency of this transition, and they're ready to be a part of it.
Okay, so we've got these 4 scenarios, each painting a different picture of ASEAN's energy future. The choices made today will have a huge impact on what that future looks like. But before we move on, I want to bring it back to our listener. How can they use this information to make choices in their own lives?
That's a great question, because at the end of the day, this transition isn't just about governments and corporations. It's about individual actions, too.
So what can the average person do besides just hoping their country picks the carbon neutrality scenario?
Well, for one, start by reducing your own energy consumption. Simple things like switching to energy-efficient appliances, driving less, being more mindful of your energy use, those all add up.
So those everyday choices actually make a difference.
Absolutely. They send a signal to the market, to policymakers, that people care about this stuff. And if you can, consider investing in renewable energy for your home or business, solar panels, things like that.
Okay, so there are concrete steps we can all take to be part of the solution. And beyond that, we can advocate for policies that support clean energy, hold our leaders accountable.
Exactly. Use your voice, use your vote, because we're all stakeholders in this transition. We all have a role to play.
All right, so we've explored those 4 scenarios, and we've talked about what all this means for you, the listener. But the AEO8 doesn't just point out the challenges, it offers solutions. What are some of the key recommendations it makes for how ASEAN can actually achieve these energy and sustainability goals?
Well, there are a lot, but I think we can group them into a few main areas. Promoting energy efficiency, accelerating the adoption of renewables, investing in grid modernization, and fostering regional cooperation.
Okay, let's break those down. Starting with energy efficiency. What kind of measures does the report suggest?
Well, it really stresses the importance of ambitious targets and policies that encourage everyone to use less energy. Things like stricter building codes, appliance standards, making energy efficiency the norm.
So it's not just an afterthought. It's built into how we design and build things from the start.
Exactly. And the report highlights the potential benefits, not just for the environment, but for the economy too. Saving money, creating jobs.
Triple win. Okay, energy efficiency. Check. Now, what about renewables? How do we get more solar, wind, and other clean energy sources out there?
Well, the report calls for a big increase in investment, both in large-scale projects and in things like rooftop solar. It also talks about streamlining the permitting process, making it easier for people to go solar.
So it's about removing the roadblocks and creating incentives for renewable energy development.
Right. And the report also pushes for a regional renewable energy market, so countries with lots of solar or wind resources can sell that clean energy to their neighbors.
Makes sense. Share the wealth, so to speak. And speaking of sharing, what about the grid? We talked about the ASEAN power grid, but I imagine there are other upgrades needed as
Oh
well.
yeah, for sure. The AE08 talks about modernizing the grid, upgrading transmission lines, investing in smart grid technologies.
So a smarter, more flexible grid that can handle the increasing amount of renewable energy coming online.
Exactly. A grid that can keep up with the changing energy landscape. And then there's the last piece, regional cooperation. The AE08 is really a big believer in ASEAN working together on this.
So recognizing that energy challenges don't stop at borders.
Exactly. The report suggests coordinating policies, sharing best practices, and working together on those big infrastructure projects like the ASEAN power grid.
ASEAN as a team tackling these issues head on.
Exactly. Leveraging their collective strengths, pooling resources, and making this transition happen faster together.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground here, but there's still more to explore. The AE08 has specific insights and projections for each of the 10 ASEAN member states. So stay tuned as we dive into what the future holds for each country and what it all means for you.
Let's do it. It's really striking how intricate this whole energy transition thing is. It's not just about like swapping out a coal plant for some solar panels. It's a whole system overhaul.
Yeah, it's like we're talking about rewiring the entire region, both literally and figuratively.
It is. It's exciting, but it's also, well, a little intimidating. Correct?
Definitely. There are so many factors at play, it's mind-boggling.
It is. You got the technology, the economics, the politics, social impacts, even cultural norms. Everything's connected.
Yeah, it's like this giant puzzle, and every piece you move, it affects everything else.
Exactly. And you can't just force the pieces to fit. It has to work for everyone.
And that's where that holistic approach the AE08 talks about comes in, right? Thinking about all the angles, not just focusing on one solution.
Exactly. Like you can't just build a bunch of solar farms and call it a day. You got to think about, okay, what does that do to the grid? What does it mean for people's energy bills? Are we creating jobs? Will communities even accept these changes?
Right. It's about finding solutions that solve multiple problems at the same time.
And that's where, well, that's where innovation is crucial, isn't it? We need new tech, new ways of doing things, new ways of even thinking about energy.
Absolutely. The AE08 highlights a bunch of areas where innovation is key, like energy storage, right? We need better ways to store energy for when the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't blowing.
Yeah, exactly. And smarter grids, grids that can handle all this renewable energy coming online.
And we still got to figure out how to decarbonize those heavy industries like transportation and manufacturing.
Right. Those are tough nuts to crack.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's not just about tweaking what we have. It's about rethinking the whole system.
a fundamental shift. And that takes a willingness to experiment, to try new things, even if they seem a little out there.
It does. It takes a little bit of, well, a little bit of courage, I guess you could say. And it takes collaboration. Nobody can do this alone.
Right. That's a key theme in the AU8 regional cooperation. It sees ASEAN as a real leader in this global energy transition, not just because of their own needs, but because of what they can teach the rest of the world.
Yeah, ASEAN has this opportunity to, well, to kind of be a model, to show other countries how it's done.
To prove that you can have economic growth and environmental protection at the same time.
Exactly. And not just catching up, but setting the pace, leading the way.
That's a powerful vision. Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into the 8th Asian Energy Outlook. We've explored the challenges, the opportunities, the scenarios, the recommendations.
We really went deep on.
We did. But as we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with this. The energy transition, it's not a destination, it's a journey.
Oh, that's good. I like that.
It's a process of constant change, adaptation, innovation, and it's a journey we're all on together.
It is. It is. And remember, the AE08 is just one piece of the puzzle. There's a ton of information out there about all this, so stay curious, stay informed.
And don't forget to check out our show notes for links to the full AE08 report and all the other resources we mentioned. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.